It's it's a level of physics, to be perfectly honest with you, that when I was a little boy, people didn't seem to understand. And why I cry so much? Because it's so simple. Because the math and the physics just doesn't lie. When you experience that, you're experiencing how the math and the physics codes work. So I was reminded, because the images come back into my mind, for example, when my mother, and when I began experiencing the images of what I was experiencing when I was about 5 or 6 years of age, and then I quantify that across the entire spectrum of consciousness in a fallen spiritual system, you can understand how this works, what I must have experienced when I was a small child. So I'll give you an example. My mother would walk me into, say, a department store, right, to outfit me, okay? Outfitters. And so you have one section, for example, for boys, and then another section for girls, right? And so as she would walk me through, I would naturally sort of choose to go over to the girls section, right? Then there's a part of me that says I can go over to the boys section, okay? Which means I can be both one and the other, because I'm both as one. That's how the physics work. But that's not how they advertise it in their mass media about gender splitting, about what gender is, because they don't want to explain it between electrons, neutrons, and protons, about what it means to be in balance between two nuclear reaction states, because I'm a polarity integrator. I'm integrated. That means I'm one. I'm one with all creation. That means I'm the center point of the whole pie, like a pie chart. You see how that is? So that means when I see the colors, the color codes of like yellows, pinks, baby blue. Oh, I love these colors. I love to wear those colors. And then there's all the other colors that we wear that are reflected through us, right? That we see in our TV screen. That means that we have all the colors available to us that the universe is giving us that we can experience in our mirror. That's an original artist. That's an original musician. You're in balance with the sound and the light field. Fission and fusing come together to become one. That sort of changes how we define what it means to be a boy or a girl. Imagine being one with all creation. So imagine experiencing that 4, 5, and 6 years of age, and then trying to explain that to adults, trying to explain that to mass media. Where did you learn on this stuff? Right? It's called becoming what that is. You have learned to become one with all creation. We're gifting eternal unconditional love, because that's what I experienced in my heart. So I cried for all those that weren't experiencing that balance of what it means to be in balance with the cycles of the atom spheres, the ether. I was just watching a short little video because I love this man. His name is Dr. Gabor Mate. When he talked about, when you think of sacrifices or what we do with our energy, our time and energy, or consciousness, which is energy, because he worked out of Vancouver. I'm familiar with his history of his parents. He self-identifies as being Jewish. As I remember it, I believe it was his grandparents that may have been killed. It could have been I don't believe it was his parents. I believe it was his grandparents. Because he said he was an infant when what went down during the Nazi regime, right? The black ties, brown shirts, same uniforms as U.S. Navy, CHP in California, fly your colors. And apparently there was a book that he referenced called The Scourge of the Swastika by somebody who was part of the group that ran Nuremberg, you know, the Nuremberg trials, crimes against humanity, all that. And so he sort of tied that all in when he was a small child, that book that his parents had in the library, because he couldn't understand from a doctor's point of view and his own, if you will, ADHD problems that he had. And so it's too bad I didn't get an opportunity to sit down with him and share with him, because when we talk about ADHD, there's that H is hypersensitive. I'm hyper, like real hyper. Hypersensitive, okay, as I explained in a previous video. And thank you so much to the Emerald Covenant that they gave me a red heart. It always goes back to Mama, okay? Healing Mama. And when Mama's healing, everyone else is healing on the entire grid network, right? That's why we're here. Because I mentioned how simple this actually is. It means that my sensors, my antenna, is so sensitive, I can detect the loss of one electron. I'm not supposed to lose any electrons because I'm giving away electrons forever on behalf of the all creation. That's hypersensitive. So when you're in a fallen system, it means you're experiencing abuse as a result of an energy harvesting system. So I put a little bit of a different axial spin rotation on it than Gabor Monte does, because doctors want to diagnose what's the problem, okay, and then what it means to be normal. Remember how I grew up as a child when we were trying to define what was normal, because there were some of us that realized this system's broken. You can't fix this. That would be your graviton technology. You can't fix that. You need to start with a clean sheet of paper. Why? Because their math doesn't work. It's a sucking machine. That's fallen consciousness. Okay? So the way to sort of undergird this is much in the same way that I did as a child, that he did as a child, was asking all the why questions. How did it get so fucked up? Right? And so one of the misnomers that I realized that I've explained as a child, because when you're hypersensitive, you're map reading the entire planetary consciousness terrain, okay, as to whether or not they're in a state of balance. So remember, when I was a child, I described how, for example, the images that would come up showing us President Roosevelt, because there was so much violence and so much war being shoved, you know, into your mirror, okay? And so I would say to myself, okay, there's President Roosevelt, you know, Pearl Harbor hit, we're going to war. And I began to realize that this guy looks like a biped, a hominid, right? Walks around on 2 feet, 5-finger people with a head, right? But you realize that I wouldn't do and make the decisions that he do, because I'm not at war with God. I'm not at war with the primal sound and light field. Okay? Which means my consciousness, which is represented by my oversoul and my energy, cannot be used as a weapon against myself. Because that's what it is. What I do to you, I do to me. And yet this individual would. Include everybody in the military would. That's why I refuse to be a part of doing that. Because I'm not going to allow them to train me to be a killer. To go to war in my own mirror against the primal light and sound field. That's the rub. So that's why I realized that I was surrounded by order followers. Okay? That follow that script. Because they believe what they're told by liars. Pathological liars. That pathology is fallen consciousness. That's losing energy. Because it's lost its connection to the primal light and sound field. That's basic physics. Okay? It's not in a state of balance. It needs energy from some source. So when you recognize at 4 years of age, you're in a fallen system because I'm experiencing the loss of voltage. I'm not supposed to experience any loss of voltage, because we're giving away voltage at a high accelerated rate of speed, which means we do not hold on to one electron. Okay? Eternity does not hold on to anything. It's giving it all away. That's free energy. That's free love. That's love, not war. So you can't be at war and experience love at the same exact moment in the completion of a magnetic circuit. So now we're back to polarity, huh? To become one. So that becomes the polarization of a universe. One versus the other. Now it's a matter of knowing one from the other. And the separation, or if you will, the splitting of the atom. Right? Oppenheimer's weaponized spirit, weaponized consciousness. Because that's what it is. So, interesting morning. I had a couple of big sneezes, but all I had to do was walk down the hallway, so I realized why that was. Because I got, you know how timelines work, right? Sequences of events that people experience as a result of blowing holes in your nuclear, using your nuclear power generator to blow holes in your own energy field. So, residue, right? Psh, recalibrate. Clear it all out. Clear the airways out. Lines of communication. With electromagnetic energy, the waves, the lines of communication, right? What we're anchored to. So anyway, it was interesting how Gabor Mate described to the audience, and the title of that video was called Wholehearted, being wholehearted, living through your heart. And I was very blessed to be able to acknowledge that at such an early age. And that blessing is by virtue of the fact that it wasn't anything that my parents told me. It wasn't anything that anybody told me. It was in my physical plane of existence, which means that the information that I was experiencing did not come through, if you will, a book that I read through somebody else telling me, a Bible, a church, my parents, or anybody communicating it to me. It's called the inner world. My heart and soul knows the truth, which simply means is that I realize that I'm on a fallen spiritual consciousness battlefield where I'm losing energy. So I acknowledge, communicate through your heart. That's your heart shield. So you can imagine when you're 4 and 5 years of age and you realize shields up, which is your heart shield to protect your soul and your spirit. When you're in a fallen realm, right? As a result of what? Control over energy, which is control over consciousness. To be used as a battery slave or a source of energy from which to what? Feed on. So it's running their tech, the machinery. Soul's energy is being used to run their machinery, which is black hole tech. Right? Now we're back to the inception of light and the inception of biotechnology. Right? And the acceleration therein of creative intelligence, right? And math and physics, codes of information, instruction sets, programming matter. So one of the things that he brought out was using an analogy or metaphorically experiences that we have in everyday life. So he used the experience of like a garden. When you go out to a garden, you see certain plants that take root, right? You plant a seed, which is an instruction packet, and it grows because you're experiencing it in your mirror. So he would use, if you will, the natural world and the way the natural world grows. From a seed, it needs a grower, and there we have solar power, right? And water, right? Chlorophyll, salts, right? Oil. And then we're looking at the health of the garden, how all the different species of plants, and I was big into permaculture back in the 1970s, and my father was into hydroponics. Okay? About how growers, things that grow, and you know this from experience by virtue of the real love that you're giving to flowers. They grow and they're healthy. They're enjoying. You realize that giving love to flowers and things that are rooted, like in root races, right? The root races. When you are what love is and you're experiencing what love is, you're going to grow healthy and fast. And that's called development. He referred to the word healthy development. That's a healthy state of consciousness. That's a healthy state of spiritual being. So we realize that love is healing as a result of suffering trauma. So trauma becomes trauma-based mind control to experience on a collective and a mass scalar waves of experiencing trauma on an accelerated, increasing level. That's what I experienced as a child. There was an increasing level of trauma being experienced across the planetary consciousness terrain. Right? It's all well documented in their books. So they're not afraid to show you who it is that they are. So it's not what they look like. So you're going, I look like human. I'm a biped hominid looking being, right? With a head, 2 arms, 2 legs, and 2 feet with 2